Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Glasgow Science Centre's Curious About Our Planet Digital Science Festival. My name is Carla, and today I'm really excited to be joined by Laura Young, also known as Less Waste Laura, who's going to be talking to us a little bit about her journey to zero waste and kicking that plastic habit. We have a little presentation from Laura, and afterwards we are really lucky that she's able to join us, and you can ask any questions that you may have in the comment box below. So now I'm going to hand you over to Laura.
Hi there, everyone. It is great to be with you for this Glasgow Science Centre Curious About event. My name is Laura, also known as Less Waste Laura online, and it is my absolute joy to be with you all virtually and to be chatting with you and answering some questions later as well. Today, I am thrilled to be talking to you about something that is a passion of mine, speaking to you about waste, about sustainability, about how that links with climate change, how we can all play our part, what that looks like, and hopefully we will learn some things together. I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey, telling a few stories about how I got to where I am today, some of the things that I do, hopefully share some tips and tricks and insights into waste, sustainability and climate change. And we're going to learn at the end together some of the ways that we can all go on a journey with this together. I want to start by talking a little bit about myself, about how I began a journey to less waste. I want you to think back 3 years ago, over 3 years ago now, to the very beginning of 2018, where on a New Year's Day walk, I decided to set myself a New Year's resolution to live with less waste, hence the name Less Waste Laura. Because on this New Year's Day walk, I was walking along a white sandy beach on the east coast of Scotland in a place called Ely. And it was a new year, we were thinking about the possibilities that were ahead of us. And as we were on this walk, we came across plastic waste. We came across litter on the beach, and I thought this is not what I should be seeing at any time of year, but definitely not on a New Year's Day walk. And it was there and then that I decided to take up this challenge to see how I could reduce my waste and how I could live a little lighter on the planet and be kind to the world around us. I also studied geography and environmental science at the University of Dundee, and I then went on to do a master's at the University of Edinburgh doing environmental protection and management. So my whole world for the last 3 years has been about waste, sustainability, climate change, and how we can all play our part in doing that. A couple of things that I did when I started this journey in 2018 was thinking about, I'm going to focus on plastic. We just had the BBC show Blue Planet and we'd seen how much plastic was a problem. And so I started thinking about how I could reduce my waste. Slowly but surely, I was working my way through my house. And when something finished, I would try and find a plastic alternative or a waste-free alternative. So I finished my toothpaste and I thought, I wonder if there's toothpaste I can find that's not in a plastic tube. Or I finished my bottle of shampoo and wondered if there was a zero waste or plastic free alternative. And most of the things I've done in my house, whether it's the toiletries I use, the food I eat or the clothes I wear, I've been finding a more sustainable way to do that. I'm going to share a bit more about how you can do that at the end, but I just wanted to say that this has been a journey I've been on, and it didn't all happen overnight. But over the last 3 years, I've really been able to reduce my waste, reduce my impact on the planet and live a bit more sustainably. I've also been learning a lot about how every single person on the planet has a sphere of influence. The people that you live with, the people that you go to school with or uni with or work with, the people in your sports clubs, your local communities, your neighbours down the street, are all people who are inside your sphere of influence. These are all people who you can help journey with you and you can encourage along with you. 2 stories of how I've done that to hopefully inspire you to think about the different spheres that you're in. The first one was a couple of years ago, I managed to get my church to stop using plastic cups for tea and coffee after the services. Now, individual actions are so important, but by making that one decision as one big building, we are now saving over 15,000 plastic cups a year. That's not just 15,000 cups not going to waste. That's also 15,000 cups that don't need to be used in the first place. They don't need to be created and they don't need to be made. And that was all simply by us switching to bringing our own mugs. And another conversation is when I was doing a sustainability internship in a big energy company last year, I decided to challenge them on the disposable single-use items that they were using in their cafeteria when the staff were having lunch. And through a couple of conversations with different staff members, it was great to see a mini campaign happen in that building to say, actually, why are we using so many disposable items? How can we use reusables like normal cutlery and plates to eat our food from? So maybe you can get thinking about what spaces you're in and what your sphere of influence in, and all the different places that you can help encourage go on a journey to less waste and to reduce your carbon emissions through reducing your waste. Also, what I've been doing though over the past 3 years is trying to learn about waste, more about sustainability, and I'd love to share with you a little bit of that education I've been doing. First of all, waste, plastic, it totally relates to the climate crisis that we're in, and I'll explain a little bit about that. But first of all, let's think about the waste that we do produce. Waste comes from all parts of our lives, and some waste is inevitable. We have waste when we're on the go, maybe we're getting a takeaway coffee or we're buying our lunch from a shop and eating it out. Waste comes from fashion, from the clothes that we wear, the clothes that we throw away, the clothes that we don't wear. Waste comes from food that doesn't make it into our supermarkets or isn't bought in time, or food that we waste in our own homes. Food comes from the packaging of our food, our toiletries, and even packages that we're getting delivered when we buy things online. And there's also waste in industries. So waste that we never see, but waste that is created throughout Scotland and throughout the world when we are creating lots of products. Now, waste we know is a problem. You will probably have seen litter in your local area, or you might have seen documentaries showing how much of an impact waste has on the world. And waste also has an impact on people. Every 30 seconds, a person across the world dies from waste, and that is from waste pollution, from toxic fumes when people have to burn waste when they don't have waste collection, or from waterborne diseases that happen when we have landfills that collect water and spread diseases that way. So waste is a huge problem, but waste also impacts the climate crisis. A little bit of science for you, since we are speaking with Glasgow Science Centre. So how does waste impact climate change? Well, there are these things called greenhouse gases, and they are a big problem for climate change. You might have heard of methane or carbon dioxide, and they are just two of the many greenhouse gases that exist in our world. And greenhouse gases, when put out into our world, put out into our atmosphere, they have the ability to increase something called global warming. And right now there's snow outside and it is a frosty day here in Glasgow. But actually, global warming, even though it might seem like a nice idea sometimes, it is a big problem for our world. Our world is heating up very quickly, and greenhouse gases being emitted into the atmosphere are one of the reasons for this. Now, what do greenhouse gases and global warming have to do with waste? Well, when we throw away things like food or plastic packaging or put things into landfill, these items begin to break down. They break down in many different ways, but when they break down, greenhouse gases are emitted. So when we throw away things, greenhouse gases escape into the atmosphere and begin to warm our planet up. So waste is absolutely linked with climate change through this idea of greenhouse gases being emitted. But also because food, fashion, disposable items and packaging all required energy to be made in the first place and will then emit carbon again when they're disposed. So everything to do with what we eat, what we use in our homes is linked with carbon and carbon emissions. A couple more statistics for you that are very relevant to Scotland. 80% of Scotland's carbon footprint comes from the goods, materials and services that we produce. And often a lot of this is things that we use once and throw away. So a huge amount of our carbon footprint as a country comes from making things, producing things that we use, and then stuff that we throw away. This is a huge area that we can work on as a country and as individuals. And another statistic for you, in 2018, the creation and disposal of all of Scotland's waste created 10.3 million tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent greenhouse gases. So those are those greenhouse gases that we were speaking about earlier that are bad for the planet. And to compare that, just the year before, 13 million tonnes of this carbon dioxide gas equivalence was created from transport on the ground in Scotland. So our waste almost equals the same carbon footprint for transport. I didn't used to know this, and this is crazy to think about how many emissions are coming from our waste. And interestingly, burning waste instead of sending it to landfill can be just as bad, especially when there is plastic inside of that waste. So hopefully with these statistics behind us and knowledge about waste, we now realise that waste has everything to do with climate change and the climate crisis. But you can see that there is a huge opportunity we have to do better. So let's think about how we should dispose of our waste. I've put a couple of examples there on the left, thinking that food, if we have any food waste, we should be composting it or disposing of it in little council collection bins. Fashion, a big one for me was learning about how do we reduce our waste for fashion well. We can mend our clothes, we can reuse clothes in different ways, we can thrift them, so send them to a charity shop, or we can recycle them. And also thinking about packaging. Some of the things we buy are bound to have waste. It might be a carton box on our food or a plastic bottle for our juice. How can we make sure that we are reusing it or we are recycling it? But I love this picture in green on the side, and it is the different ways that we can dispose of things, but also remember how we can reduce our waste. The first one is to reduce our waste, reduce the need to not only dispose of things, but even buy things in the first place. We can refuse things. That looks like refusing a plastic straw in a restaurant, refusing a bag at the shopping centre and bringing your own. Or maybe you can think of other examples where you can just refuse waste in the first place. Recycle, making sure that we do recycle when we have those items to make sure that they might get a chance of being reused again. Reusing is the next one. Think about the ways that we can reuse everything in our everyday lives. If you've wrote on one side of a bit of paper, write on the back before you throw it away. Maybe you've got a plastic bottle that you can reuse time and time again. Maybe there's an item of clothing that you can repurpose and reuse in a different way. And rot is a great last one, and that's thinking about organic waste. That's our food waste and our garden waste, making sure we dispose of it in the correct way. But ultimately, the most important of all of these is to reduce and refuse, because the biggest step we can take is not to create any waste at all, and these are the best ones for us to do. But I want to leave you with my top tip. So if anybody says to me, I really want to reduce my waste and I want to begin a journey to sustainability, this is what I tell them. So the first thing I want them to do is a waste audit. Doesn't sound very fun, but it is very helpful. This is something I did in 2018, and it is 4 easy steps to reducing your waste. The first thing you need to do is collect your waste. Collect it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, even 4 weeks if you can, and keep it all together in one place. So that is when you're out and about, you might get some waste with you. Make sure you collect that and keep that until you get home. Even if it's things that can be recycled, keep it all together. Step number 2 is then to sort it out. After 2, 3, or 4 weeks, however long you can manage, sort out your waste. Put it out on the floor or outside if you're wanting to keep mess out, and have a look at what you have. Sort it into the different items that are in your waste. Then what I want you to do is step number 3. Select something. Select an item that fills up your waste, and that is what you're going to try and reduce one at a time. So when I did this back in 2018, one of the most voluminous items that I had in my waste was things to do with buying my lunches out. It was lots of meal deals and lots of boxes for sandwiches and packets of food. And so I said, that's the first thing I'm going to try and reduce because it took up the most space in my waste. So the first thing I did was think, how can I reduce my waste in my lunches, and how can I pick that item first? So maybe for you, it's something similar, or maybe it's something else. Your waste will be unique to you, and you can pick which items you want. And step number 4 is to repeat it. After a month, try it again and see what new item you can do. This way, you're targeting the things that you want to reduce, and you're doing it in a way that is sustainable for you, not trying to do it all at once, but will also help you reduce the most waste the quickest. So that is my top tip, a waste audit. But maybe you want to take on some other challenges, and the Glasgow Science Centre and I did an amazing climate change challenge campaign just last year, so 2 months ago, but these are still amazing ways that we can be reducing our carbon footprint and reducing our waste at the same time. We came up with 7 amazing climate challenges to help you on your way to a less wasteful and less carbon intensive lifestyle. I'll tell you all 7 in a minute, but this was my most fun one today, and it is to audit your fridge. I love doing an audit, as you can tell, and it is because the most sustainable food in the world is the food you already have in your fridge. It's the food that you don't want to waste. And the most sustainable ones are the ones that you can make from food already in your fridge. So you can take some time today to sort through your fridge, see what needs to be pulled to the front if it's going to go out of date soon, or see the little odds and ends that you could put together in a fun recipe. And you can audit this. And in my fridge, I also have a space called the must eat now space. And that is a space where things that are maybe going to go out of date quickly, they go there to make sure that I always remember I need to eat that now, and I'll make sure to put it into my next recipe. However, if you want to see them all, here they are. And there are some great ones, great challenges. A 4-minute shower challenge. I found my favourite 4-minute song, and there's a whole bunch of them on the Glasgow Science Centre hub to listen to in my 4-minute shower. Thinking about ways of doing active travel, thinking about less waste laundry, auditing your fridge, the one we've spoken about, making a low impact meal, borrowing, swapping or thrifting your outfit, or signing up to your local library. These are just some of the amazing climate challenges that we've got. We'd also love to hear any more that you have. But hopefully this gives you a little bit of an idea of all the things we can do as individuals, but remembering back to the beginning about the sphere of influence you have. Think of the different places that you can do all of these in. I hope this whistle-stop tour of waste and climate action has given you some ideas and some inspiration for things that you can go away with today and do. And it's also given you a bit of the science and the statistics behind you to give you the confidence to speak about this to your friends, your family, or to other people that you know. Thank you so much for listening, and I can't wait to now join you for a live Q&A to hear all of your thoughts and questions about waste, sustainability, plastic, and so much more. So thank you very much, everyone.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We are now really lucky to be joined by Laura live to answer any questions you might have. Now, remember, you can submit questions using the YouTube comments box below. But to start things off, Laura, what's been the biggest challenge you've faced? Which item's been the most difficult to switch over to non-plastic equivalent?
That's a great question. And I think it's one that's probably changed over time. I think when it comes to things like toiletries and beauty products, I've now found the perfect items. Like I've found my favourite shampoo bar, I found my favourite plastic-free makeup. But it took a while to get to that. It took a while to find the perfect one. But probably the items I've struggled with the most have been food items. So a lot of the time, our food comes in packaging, it comes in plastic bags, or it comes with a plastic bottle. And so that's some of the stuff that's the hardest to find a swap for. And I definitely think we've been in lockdown, we've not been able to get out and about as much, and that's really limited a lot of the choice that we have. So foodstuff's definitely been the longer term thing, the thing I still struggle with, the thing that sometimes I do have to buy with plastic. But I know that we've had some amazing zero waste shops or refill shops popping up, so that's made it a lot easier. There's even plastic-free sort of refill delivery systems, like delivery companies who can bring it right to your door, which is great. But I think the food stuff's been the most difficult because we're limited to what's in the supermarket sometimes, and we've just got to try and encourage them to help us out and help us out from their end.
Definitely. I've seen a few of those refill shops around. Are you hoping that that's kind of the future of food shopping? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. If anything else, they're really fun. It's fun to go and fill up your bags or your jars or get little paper bags if you don't have anything with you that day. But actually, it's just great to see what other things are out there. And I found that herbs and spices in particular are so cheap. Like you can get them for so much money off. So it's a great saving tip there as well. But I hope that they become more and more popular. And I know over the last 2, maybe 3 years, we've seen them, tenfold increase across Scotland, and we've got loads in Glasgow as well here, but in lots of other parts of the country. So I really hope that's something that just becomes more and more popular because it's loads of fun, and hopefully they become more accessible and just become, on every high street. That would be amazing to see that.
Yeah, I would definitely love to see that. We do actually have a question coming up from the YouTube comment box. So Lucy would like to ask, how do you deal with the supermarket packaging?
It's a tough one because I know that I've moved around quite a few times in the last couple of years. So I've lived in Dundee, I've lived in Edinburgh, and now I'm back in Glasgow. And it's difficult because every time you move, you're like, oh, I've got to find a new shop, I've got to get a new routine. So how do we work around it? And sometimes your local supermarket might be a small one, sometimes it's a huge one. So you're really, your choice changes all the time. One of the things I try to do is actually just have a look around. Have a look at what the supermarket has on offer. Don't just go for the things you regularly buy. See if you can get them a bit different. Maybe if you're in the fruit and veg bit, try and have some fun with what's the packaging-free fruit and veg. How can you use that in some recipes and really try and find out a way to work that out? But ultimately, we are limited with what is in our supermarkets. So it's important to know, like, don't feel guilty, don't get too frustrated. Like, what we can do is feedback. We can feedback to supermarkets and say, I would love to have more plastic-free items. You can send an email or you can just have a conversation when you're at the till. You can even contact brands directly and say, I would love to see you changing your packaging and having a way that we can either recycle it in store or be able to get it packaging free. And some of these conversations have been really beneficial. We've seen big supermarkets like Sainsbury's, they decided to get rid of plastic bags for fruit and veg in their supermarkets a couple of years ago. And that was because customers decided to reach out and say something. And we've seen other supermarkets, there's obviously loads of supermarkets available, but offering trials for fruit and veg with no plastic packaging, or we've even seen big refill shops going around. So actually, you've got power as a consumer to have a conversation with the staff or the brands to really push for change. And we're seeing that now more and more, luckily. We're seeing lots of brands deciding to change, and that is so, so encouraging.
Yeah, that's all part of that sphere of influence you're talking about. I've also seen in supermarkets, they've got the wonky veg now. Instead of wasting that veg, it's all there for you to buy.
Absolutely. That's another huge thing. What we buy in the supermarket, it used to be the perfect pepper or big juicy red apples, or it was everything that looked absolutely perfect as if it could be in a movie. But actually, we know that fruit and veg and all kinds of food comes in totally wonky and weird ways. And actually, it's great to see supermarkets encouraging that, because ultimately, food's all going down the same, like it's going the same way. It doesn't matter what it looks like, it all tastes delicious. And if you've got some wonky veg or wonky fruit, blend it up into a smoothie or soup or something. So it's really great to see that supermarkets are taking that on. And it's great that as consumers, we're finding a bit of fun in it as well.
Definitely. We're making a few steps forward for sure. Thanks, Laura. We've got another YouTube question coming up just now. So Mohammed would like to ask, what would you recommend to reduce waste on first?
Great. This is a great question. And it's one that I would say is totally unique to you. So there's no point in me saying, we should all reduce waste by getting a reusable coffee cup. Because if you don't have a reusable coffee cup, or you don't drink coffees out and about, then there's no need for you to get that. So that's why I'd always recommend doing the waste audit. So that is looking at your own waste, seeing what is the biggest thing you produce. So when I did this back in 2018, for me, it was meal deals. I was a student. I was getting meal deals from supermarkets and getting loads and loads of packaging. So for me, that was one of the biggest areas that I could work on. So for you, think about the waste that you produce. We're all in our homes a lot more these days. So maybe you're even seeing what waste you produce. So maybe it's plastic bottles for juice or for milk or for something else, maybe you could try and find some alternatives for that. Maybe it's packaging from like snacks and biscuits and cakes, so maybe you could try baking some more, see what other ways you could do it. Or maybe it's, I mean, loads of us probably have a lot of waste coming from online ordering, because a lot of the time that's the only way we can get stuff. But maybe we can try and say, can we order stuff all in one go so that we avoid lots and lots of deliveries? Or can we order it from the same place we get our groceries, so maybe that can come in the same order? Or maybe it's something we can pick up. And so there's all of these different ways that we can try and reduce it. But have a look at your waste, pick a couple of items at a time and just try and blast through it. But I would always say one of the worst wastes we all produce is the single-use stuff. So anything that we just use once and throw away, that's always the best stuff to start with. So just think, is there any pointless plastic, I like to call it? Is there anything that's just pointless in your house that you can try and get rid of and try? So one of the swaps that my boyfriend has made is he has a coffee machine. So it's the little pods that you put into the coffee machine and it makes your coffee. But that pod is used once, thrown away or recycled, never to be used again. But actually you can get little reusable coffee pods for all of these fancy machines. And so that's a great way to eliminate something that was very single use, only used once. And so there's amazing little swaps that you can make in your house. And it's just about finding out those kind of things that you need.
Definitely. And I've seen quite a lot of repurposing of single-use items as well, which is awesome to see, definitely, especially using the pods as well. So Laura, we have another question from YouTube coming up just now. So Splish Splash would like to ask, where do you think we will be with recycling in 10 years' time?
Well, I think I've got quite a controversial version of recycling, because I really don't like recycling. And I think it's because we have this idea that recycling is perfect, that it's the answer, but actually it's not really the answer. We need to be producing less waste. Obviously, we should all recycle. I'm not telling you not to recycle. Like, I still recycle. If I have paper, plastic, glass, metal, I do recycle. But we need to remember that there's actually, how we all know the mantra, reduce, reuse, recycle. There's actually, I would say 4. So I would say it's refuse, reduce, reuse, recycle. But it's important to know that there's 3 whole steps before we get to recycling. There's 3 more things that we can do to try and limit the waste that we're creating in the world before recycling. So I always would encourage people to think, actually, recycling's not the answer. Let's just try and not produce that waste in the first place. But one of the things that I know, and this is actually something really relevant to Glasgow, just this year, one of the things that Glasgow is trying to do is trying to sort out our waste collection. And loads of council areas, mine is one as well, has gone from having fortnightly bin collections to now having it every 3 weeks. And the reason they're trying to do that is they're trying to say, actually, we're only going to come now every 3 weeks to get your general waste, to try and encourage people more and more to recycle. Because actually, in Glasgow, I think our recycling rate is less than 30%. So we're not really recycling very well, and only 9% of plastic around the world has been recycled. So first of all, we just need to get better at it. We need to think, actually, we need to recycle everything we can to try and give it that chance of having a second life. But we also need to realise that the technology is not quite there yet. It's not quite as advanced. So say you have a plastic bottle and you put it into a recycling centre. Even if that plastic gets recycled, it's downcycled, which I was explaining earlier. And so it doesn't come out the same. And when we buy something that's made of recycled plastic, it's still got some, they call it virgin plastic in there. So it's still got some new plastic. So we're still not quite there with the science yet. So while the science is trying to advance and while we're trying to get better and more efficient at recycling, I would say let's just try and reduce the amount we have to recycle. So the first step is obviously trying to avoid, sending things to landfill, sending things to be incinerated. But I would say even more, like, even if something comes in plastic, paper, glass or metal, and we can recycle it, why not just try and cut that waste out? So I don't know where recycling will be in 10 years. I hope recycling will be more widely available across the world. We know that many, many people don't have waste collection, let alone recycling. So I hope that that becomes more common. But I would say I hope recycling becomes redundant, that we don't need to have recycling because we've just found ways of being circular, keeping things in a circular pattern, or we're just producing so little waste that we really don't have to worry about it.
Definitely. That's actually really interesting. So is there a limit to how often things or how many lives a bit of plastic has?
Yeah, so one of the really interesting things is, so let's take the plastic bottle example. So when you recycle plastic, normally what happens in a really basic way is the material goes into a machine, it gets shredded up into little pieces, it then gets melted down and reformed into something called nurdles. So it's the tiny, tiny, tiny little, sort of like plastic beads almost. And then these are used to then make new plastic. But what happens when plastic is shredded and it's melted and it's, pushed and pulled into all different materials? That's it's really enduring for that material, and it gets broken down quite a bit, and it becomes a bit weaker than before. And so plastic, like a plastic bottle, is probably going to come out more like polyester fibers. So that's kind of what's in our clothes, or it may get put into mattress material or something that's a bit more a lighter plastic. So part of this is actually the fact that we imagine that you put in a plastic bottle and out comes a plastic bottle, so we can just do this over and over and over again. But that's not really true. Actually, when we put something in, it comes out weaker than before and less than before. And so there is a limit to how many times we can recycle things. This is quite similar to paper. So when you put in paper, you can imagine if you've ever done paper mache, it gets all mushy and you can almost see the little fibers of plastic in it. So paper. So when you put paper in to get recycled, the same happens. It's broken down, it's pulled out to be the fibers, and it's probably going to come out as a napkin, a table napkin or something else. And so with paper and plastic particularly, this idea that we can just keep going and keep going, it's not really true. We do still need to have more oil pulled up to make plastic, or we need more trees cut down to make paper. So it's just really important that we kind of remember that recycling is not currently there. Glass and metal, however, it is a bit better, so we can do that a bit more intensely. We can, churn them out a bit more. But yeah, it's really interesting, and that's something I didn't know about recycling. I thought recycling was this perfect solution, but it's not really there yet, and that's because of the science, it's because of us. We don't recycle enough, and so it's just about trying to encourage us to think a bit differently and to think a bit more broadly with waste.
That's really interesting and something I didn't know either, so definitely worth looking into. We do actually have another question from YouTube coming up just now. So the question is from Splish Splash, and they're asking, how many things have you recycled?
I mean, well, I've met many, many things across my whole life. But I mean, here in our home, so our council area, the things that we can recycle plastic, paper, metal, glass, paper, metal, plastic. Yeah, I think that was all of them. We also recycle food. So we've got a compost bin. So we have a little food waste collection. So any food waste that we have, we try and recycle that. We've also got a compost heap in our garden. So that's a really important thing to remember. Food can be recycled. But one of the things I would urge people to do is actually think about how we can repurpose. You mentioned that earlier. How can we upcycle and repurpose things? So, before I used to try and recycle clothes, but we know that again isn't really great. But I've been trying to think, what can I do with my old clothes that maybe aren't too good to be donated? Can I sew them up in a different way? Can I make clothing rags, cleaning rags for the house? And so I think it's just trying to, every piece of waste, I'm like, can I give this one more use before I throw it away? Or can I give it one more purpose before I throw it away?
And clothing's quite a big one, isn't it? Especially just now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, clothes are one of those items that we forget that it becomes waste. So many of us, well, first of all, you grow. So throughout your life, you grow, you outgrow things. And so it's really important to think about our clothes, because clothes are one of the things that we all have in common. We all wear clothes. We all enjoy a bit of fashion, or we enjoy dressing up sometimes. But it's important to know that's a huge waste. And so it's thinking about how can we live a way that's a bit differently so that we're not throwing away clothes all the time. One of the things I've been trying to challenge myself to do is learn how to sew a bit better, so that when something gets a big hole in it, I don't have to throw it away. I can try and mend it a bit more, and also just think a bit differently about where we get our clothes from and how we can avoid buying new all the time.
Definitely, that's a really good point, Laura. Thank you very much. And we do actually have another question from YouTube coming up just now. So Stuart would like to know, do you think refill stations will take off where you take your own container?
I hope they do. So I've loved using them. So again, as I said earlier, I've moved around a few times, and every time I've moved, it means I've had different things around me. So when I was in Edinburgh, I was a student in Edinburgh, there was a refill shop 5 minutes from my front door, which I was so lucky about. And it wasn't there when I first moved in, so I was buzzing when it came. And that was great, because it meant on my way home from uni or my way home from work, I would pop in, grab a few things, and then, just make my way home. So I hope that they do become more and more common. I also hope that they become in areas that people need them. So in Glasgow, we've got, I think, maybe 4 or 5 now, and they're all in different areas, which is great. So it's really accessible for everyone. I don't have one where I currently live in Glasgow, so I'm having to think outside the box, but I hope that, if one came down the road, I would definitely be using it. So I hope that they do become more and more accessible. And I know there's loads of community startups that are getting these kind of things in place. So it is really, really amazing to see them. And they're loads of fun. It's a great day out, especially for kids. Once we can really get a bit more back to normal, it's a great place to take kids to learn all about foods and see them all. And it's quite fun.
Yeah, I can imagine it's like those ice cream stations when you were younger. But Stuart also has an additional comment, and he says, I think we need more compost awareness.
Absolutely. What this again was one of the things that I found really shocking when I learned about waste, that food waste is a huge emitter of carbon, especially when it's sent to the wrong place. And by that I mean when it's sent to landfill, instead of being composted or turned into lovely soil. And if food waste was a country, it'd be the 3rd biggest emitter. So we know that this is an area that we can all work on, because we've all got food in our fridge that's maybe gone out of date because we've forgotten about it, or we've all got things that we have no idea if it can be used again. So one of the really fun things we've been trying to challenge ourselves with in lockdown is really looking at our food waste and say, how can we really avoid any more waste from any of this food? So for example, I didn't realize that you can take apple cores or peelings of apples. You can store them in a jar with water and a bit of sugar, and after a few weeks that turns into apple cider vinegar, and so you can use that to make salad dressings. I use it as conditioner. Sounds a bit wacky, but it totally works. So that's been something cool. We've also been experimenting cooking with banana peels. I know, again, it sounds a bit wacky, but you can cut them up, shred them, and make a sort of like barbecue. It's almost like a pulled pork kind of texture, or you can whiz them up and make pancakes or banana bread. So we've really been looking at food waste and thinking, how can we reduce it? But importantly, the food waste that we do have, so you always end up with a wee bit of something. How can we make sure it's composted? So if you've got a garden, can you get a little compost heap on the go? Or can you push for your council to get a food waste collection if you don't already have it, to turn that into lovely, delicious soil that can really help with our farming and be sent around the country. So, I mean, that's really important. And I know that Glasgow is now going to restart the food waste collection in flats, because I know that hasn't been happening in lockdown. So it's great to know that that's back on the agenda and that's going to start happening again.
That's amazing news. I didn't actually know about the apple core thing. I did hear that you can regrow a spring onion by using the little stem.
Yeah, that's another thing. Oh my gosh, yeah, of course you can. So things like spring onions, anything that has a root on it. So I've seen people doing it with celery. I've seen people doing it with leeks. Like, it's really, really cool. You can regrow stuff. That's actually one of the funny things that we decided to regrow. So in last summer, we decided to try and start gardening. And I had looked on, you find these things online. You're like, I'm going to test this out. And so, you know how sometimes if you've got a bag of potatoes and maybe you forget about 1 or 2 and they start to grow arms and legs, and it's all looking a bit weird. If you actually cut those off, so the wee bits with the sort of arms and legs coming out of them, if you cut them off or just take the whole potato and plant it, that will grow a potato plant. I read this online, so I was like, I don't know if this is true. I don't believe that this is true. So last year, we decided to do a bit of gardening, and so I decided to plant some of these things in our garden. Planted them, sort of left them, forgot about them. Last weekend, my dog was out in the garden and started digging out this patch of soil that we have. And I was like, what is she digging? And then she turned around and she had a potato in her mouth. And I was like, what? So we went over it and we totally forgot that last year we'd planted these little cuttings of potatoes that had been growing arms and legs. You couldn't really eat them. And they'd grown a whole patch of potatoes, and my little puppy had found them. So actually, there's all these crazy things we can do with food that we might not think can be eaten anymore. We can plant them in the garden and you'll have potatoes a year later. So that was quite funny. That was a bit of a surprise.
That's crazy. I really didn't know you could do that. You'll be having baked potato for a while now. So we have time for one more question, Laura, and that is, COP26, the largest climate change conference that occurs each year, is going to be held in Glasgow, hopefully this year. What do you hope COP26 will do for the UK?
I mean, that's a huge question. I think one of the things is I hope COP in general is successful. You know, this is aside from the Paris Agreement, which was the one that was one of the most important ones when all the countries made the big decisions about what they were going to do, this is the next biggest one, because we're coming back together to say, what are we doing? Like, what progress have we made, and what commitments are we going to make? So I hope in general it's really successful. But the UK has never really held a conference this important or this big. I mean, it's great that it's coming to Scotland and to Glasgow, but I really hope this is a chance for the UK to say, we're going to make a good impression, not just because we're the host, but actually because we really care about climate change. We care about the world, the way the world's being impacted. We care about the people that are being impacted by climate change. So I hope that this is a real chance for the UK to say, okay, people are coming to our doorstep. We're going to be hosting them. And we don't know what it's going to look like, but we know that the eyes are going to be on us. And so I really hope that we take the initiative to go beyond and to go further and to really say, actually, we're going to put in place policies and plans. We're really going to invest well. We're going to equip we're going to equip people, support people to live a bit more climate, sustainably. And one of the things I hope as well, because it's really interesting the fact that Glasgow's hosting it, but it's the UK government that are going to be there, that are going to be the ones sitting at the table. But actually the Scottish government as well have a real opportunity to say, even though we're not obligated to put forward, commitments and plans, we're still going to do that. So we've already seen Scotland say, we're putting stuff on the table, we're still going to step up. And so I hope even as Scotland as well, we say, we're also hosting this, like we're going to join together to really make a huge impact and make a statement, lift up the voices of all of the countries that are going to be there and really be bold. I hope we are bold in the things that we do. And I hope that they listen to the people who say, I want to live more sustainably. Can you help me? I live in Glasgow. I live in Scotland. I live in wherever. Can you help me be more sustainable? Help me make good choices by making more things available. So I just hope it's bold. I hope it's great. I hope it's, exciting.
It is an incredibly exciting opportunity, and we can't wait here to see what comes of it. So sadly, we are actually just about out of time for today, but thank you so much, Laura, for joining us and sharing your zero waste journey and answering all of our questions. Thank you again to our viewers today and those who've submitted questions using the comment box. Now, if you have further questions, if they pop into your head maybe later on today, you can pass them along to Glasgow Science Centre and we'll be able to then pass them further to Laura. So if you haven't already, make sure to check out all our other events that happened over the last few days in the Atmos Theatre. But that's all for today, I'm afraid. Thank you again so much, Laura, for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Goodbye.
Bye.